Hey there, I'm Dan. So I thought, you know, I am a writer, so I thought I'm into stories, and I thought one of the things that might be fun for all of us to sort of think about and kick around together, because I'm sure we've all absorbed a lot of surf stories in our lives, is it's something I've really been struck by in the last few years is how the story is changing. And I'll sort of give you a little background on this. You know, many years ago, a long time ago, when I was actually a graduate student here at UC Santa Cruz in the 90s, and I was just starting to really think hard about surfing and trying to figure out how to write about surfing. I was really struck by how hard it was to tell a good surf story. Like whenever I hear that Hawaiian phrase, you know, we all just sat around and talked story, you know, that guy has so many stories, I would think, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, we do tell stories to each other, but if you think about trying to tell somebody a good actual, like, you know, another surfer might be happy to hear, oh God, it was like 8 foot and perfect and I got this insane wave. Well, then maybe they're okay, so maybe that's an okay story to another surfer. That is not a story, right? That's nothing from a narrative standpoint. So the stories that we tell, you know, when we build really, you know, surf narratives, they're sort of narratives about our lives, narratives about personal journeys. Okay, so I'll give you an example of what I mean. So, and I'll give you the background and then I'll bring it up to how I think it's changed. And I'd actually really love to hear you guys kick this around with me or push and pull at it. But if you know, you guys have probably all watched a lot of the early classic surf movies. So we can think of those classic surf movies. And I mean the narrative fiction films, not the early sort of surf documentary movies, but the narrative fiction films, like I'm thinking like you know, Gidget and Ride the Wild Surf and those kind of movies. So and let's sort of take that maybe up through the North Shore. There's a very particular set of narratives going on in those movies, which there's this very sort of white West Coast white American encounter with something just slightly a tiny bit other in Hawaiian culture, and we will do this. You know, we'll play ukuleles and we'll have straw hats and we'll loosen up a little bit. And there are these very clear, crisp gender role. I mean, this is another part of what's hitting me with this is this sort of change in the roles men and women are playing in the stories we tell. In the North Shore, you know, in the sort of the blonde white all-American kid, right? He's a wave pool surfer in Arizona, and he wins a contest, and the reward for his contest is to get to go to the North Shore and become a real surfer on waves. And he has this whole kind of you know, mentorship with a sensei and he falls in love with a native girl. So it's another sort of white. And I know Sam is living this dream. But that's his personal story to tell, which I won't, you know, in that he's actually in love with that actual girl. But that's a different anyway. But so it's the white guy goes to the islands, and it's a kind of, you know, interracial marriage, light sort of soft thing. But at the end of it, he's not going to stay Hawaiian. He's going to go back to art school in the States, right? So. And this is really sort of typical of those early stories. We're going to go into the world of surf. We're going to get a little bit of that otherness, but then we're going to like go back and, you know, like at the end of Gidget, I think Moondoggie is going to law school or something, right? Okay, so if you and there are a few other surf narratives, but these are sort of the older ones. And the reason I've been struck, the material that has struck me recently has come to me for two reasons. One is a couple of books that I read by young men. These are books that are not in print yet, but they will be soon. So these are surf books. One by a guy named Chaz Smith, who's been in the surf media a bit. He's written for the magazines, and he's written a book called "Welcome to Paradise, Now Go to Hell" about the North Shore, in which he's really the first surf writer who finally had the guts to tell the story that all of the rest of us in the surf media have known for 20 years and have been too chicken shit to write about the North Shore, really, which is about the seriously spooky underbelly there, and the part of it that's not just kind of cool somehow, but that is actually really creepy and fucking horrible at some level. So this guy had the guts to tell that story. But part of what's interesting, but what's more interesting than that is is his depiction of himself, right? So this guy, Chaz Smith, is really nuts. You guys are you might hate this story, but I guarantee you will enjoy reading this book when it's in print. Just keep an eye out for this, Welcome to Paradise Now. I guarantee, I read it in about 8 straight hours. I couldn't put it down. Is his depiction of himself as a fashion-obsessed, chain-smoking dandy of a surfer on the North. It's really interesting. It's not that that's an attractive figure to me. It's not. That's not who I am. But there's a different kind of personal narrative that's emerging there. Now, the other book is called The Great Floodgates of the Wonder World by a guy named Justin Hawking, who's also a young writer, and it's his first book, and it's a memoir. It's a surf memoir, but it's surfing in this is sort of embedded in this kind of early 20s coming-of-age story that involves maybe coming out of the closet, maybe not, being a skateboarder in New York. It's sort of surfing blended in with all these other things that have never been a part that have sort of never been a part of the stories that we told in the surfing world. Again, it's not my experience, his experience, but I'm just struck by how it's a sort of, okay, so now the other source of material for me on how the story is changing has to do with my daughters getting into surfing, and my 11-year-old, my oldest daughter, went on a little, surf movie kick this summer, just because of the glory of Netflix, and she watched she watched The North Shore and loved it by herself, but then she also sort of came across these other movies, a Roxy vehicle, really, I should call it, called First Love, which is this sort of documentary about it's kind of an advertorial type thing, really, but I think it's 2 or 3 Australian girls who are, really close friends and buddies, and they get their big chance to go to the North Shore together, and it's really exciting. And the other one is, she also watched the Bethany Hamilton movie, and she also watched Blue Crush, which is not that bad of a movie, weirdly. It should be terrible, but it's actually sort of, there's some things about it that are pretty interesting. And the surf footage, as you guys may know if you've seen it, is sort of unbelievable how good some of it is out at Pipeline. So in these 2 men I've just described, the 2 books by men, there's very different kind of self-identification going on. There's some breakdown in surf identity where, at least even as recently as 10, 15, 20 years ago, when I was trying to figure out how to identify myself as a surfer, because I wasn't a local, I was a UC Santa Cruz student, I was kind of a nature guy, and I just was sort of hard to figure out my identity as a surfer didn't fit in down here at all in those years. So here are these 2 other guys in these radical, totally unafraid to assert these completely different, non-conforming male identities in these surf. And then there's these movies about women surfers, and I also just got a manuscript of a book doesn't have a publisher yet by a woman surfer who's sort of a memoir about learning to surf at around the age of 40. But if you think about, like, if we just compare like Blue Crush to to Gidget or North Shore, it's as if there's, all of a sudden the lead character is, now of course she has to be blonde and she has to be, the movie is sort of playing these interesting games around surf identity, in that the main surfer is female, the eye candy that she falls in love with on the North Shore is a big hunky male, right? So we get to take like quarterback, the sort of hunky pro quarterback football player guy and turn him into eye candy for a female. It's really sort of an interesting game that it's playing, right? She's not from the mainland, she's a girl growing up poor on the North Shore. It would have been, she is like the sort of perfect blue-eyed blonde, which is sort of problematic in that regard. It plays this game of having her 2 best friends be a little bit ethnic, right? One of them's Asian, one of them is sort of indeterminate, but they're sort of both a little bit closer to being somehow Hawaiian and some other, but the movie is just playing all these interesting games around, and the big journey for her is to become a pro surfer and get sponsored. So she's not going to go back to the mainland. She's going to stay within that. Anyway, I could say more about that, and I have a lot more to say, but I won't go on and on about it. But I think I just would be interested to hear you guys sort of push and pull at it and ask questions about it, because I think there's a lot to say about it. And another piece of it we could do would be to sort of think about the intervention of the Roxy. You know, a lot of you probably remember when the ads, the only time you ever saw a woman in a surf magazine was her ass in a reef ad. You know, every single issue of the magazine, you'd open it up and there'd be a reef bikini ad, you know, with these crazy pictures in a thong bikini. And Roxy was this kind of interesting intervention of, you know, and pissed off a lot of women surfers for good reason. But, you know, it was a slightly step. At least the women were surfing, right? They had to find models who could surf, but at least they were surfing. Anyway, okay, I'll stop there. But that's.
So, I'm Marcus, I'm the editor at Surfline, and I want to talk a little bit about technology and how it's, or at least how I've seen it affect surfing. I started to surf in San Francisco in the early 90s when there was basically 2 surf magazines, mainly written by the guy over there and his brother, who I read those stories a lot. And in San Francisco at that time, there wasn't much of a surf culture. And so every month they came out, and I would just wait for them to come out, and I'd read them, you know, cover to cover. I'd look at the ads, and like, okay, the ads and the letters and the photos and the stories and everything else, you know, is kind of this way of feeling kind of connected to surfing, because as it is, like Sam had mentioned before, so fleeting, you know, you get away when you come in. So I think surf media has acted that, you know, as a way to feel connected to the thing that you're so obsessed by. And then basically, yeah, the whole thing. And so basically, after reading the surf mags, I went and traveled around the world, in large part inspired by the surf mags, for a couple years, just with a backpack and a surfboard, and went all over different places in the world. And I came back, went to university in San Francisco, and then somehow early I got involved at Surfing Magazine after Sam had left, and then the .com boom came around 2000, and we started a website called swell.com, and it had the most sort of robust, bloated editorial staff of anything in the history of the sport. I think there was probably like 20 of the best editors, writers, photographers, etc. So it kind of created this giant expectation of what the surf media could become. At that time, it was 2000. And of course, it just kind of went like this, and then it went like that because of the internet. Boom, went bust. And so I stayed on at Surfline, and then around like 2005, 2006, we decided to do more editorial stuff. And we're sitting around a room, me and my boss Dave, who worked with Sam as well, we're looking at each other going, man, I wonder if there's enough stuff happening to do like one thing a day on the internet. Like at the time there was really nothing like that, you know, and it's just going, man, is there one thing a day that happens in surfing that we could report on? And we're like, I think we can. I think there's like one thing a day that probably happens. And then pretty quickly we're like, it started going, we're like, actually there's kind of a lot more than one thing a day that happens. And so gradually over the course of not very long, pretty soon it went from like 2 surf magazines, Surfing and Surfer, and then like a movie, you know, 1 or 2 movies a year that kind of helped you feel connected to surfing, helped me feel connected to surfing. Pretty soon it became this daily thing where surfers would feel connected to surfing more by what we had started to do. And there was the two-way dialogue began too, because it wasn't just this print magazine that maybe you could write a letter to and maybe someone would deem it worthy of being published, and you know, prisoners were really good at that, you know, writing long letters with big illustrations. But it felt like all of a sudden it just, again, there's this connection where you, each day or each morning you wake up, you could look at it and feel connected and write in. So basically, and the other thing too, for us at least, was that the stories were, and it kind of back to Sam's thing, were about waves. I mean, Surfline has always been about waves. Sean started it in 1985 to help surfers get better waves. That was his whole point. And so for us, coming at it from an editorial way, waves became the story. You know, waves are the story. People want to know whether it's perfect or not perfect or what kind of wave it is. You know, it's like people want to talk about the waves they're going to get. They want to talk about the waves they just got. They want to talk about the waves they're going to maybe get or the waves they heard about. And so, you know, we have a thing kind of at Surfline, which is this sort of mantra of like, you predict it and you prove it and then you curate it. So the predicting part was like the forecasting and the weather charts, and then the proving it's the cameras, and then the curating it is taking the stories from people up and down the coast from like a swell, the swell stories that we started doing then, have still the most popular thing we do, more popular than contests, more popular than profiles. Everyone wants to, everyone might know that Kelly Slater just did a rodeo flip in the Mentawais, but they want to see the spot down the road on the day of the year. Like that's what people generally want to see more than anything, other than, themselves at the spot of the year. That's what they really want to see is pictures of themselves. But so then again, it's this connection thing, so as the digital media has kind of gotten deeper, people feel more connected to it. So basically, the other thing about, so there's that part of the internet and the way the digital media has affected surfing. It's like, I think people, because you'd have never, again, back when there was 2 magazines, they might publish maybe, like Sam said, 2 minutes in a year of surfing. And then so as the digital media sort of go and cameras got, more digital, maybe it was like 10 minutes the next year. And maybe like now we cover an hour of surfing if you look at like the thousands of photos that we publish. But basically, so that part of it, people started feeling more connected to it, writing in about their spots. And then the other thing that we noticed that happened around the same time was that the internet allowed pro surfing to be relevant. For a long time, pro surfing was just kind of this thing. I mean, it was just happened 2 months ago, and maybe someone won a world title, and who knows what that guy thinks, and he rips, but they're in jerseys and these stickers, and unless you lived in Huntington Beach and saw the contest, it didn't, at least for my reality, the friends that I grew up surfing with just didn't care about surf contests. But as the internet got better, webcasts got better. I mean, the first one was, there was one at Pipe in the late 90s, I think, but the first one that I remember was Blue Torch, which was another internet thing in 2000, had a whole bunch of money, and they went to the channel at Chopu, and it was like, I think they spent $1 million to just sit there, and it was like, you could look at the photo, it was like this big, and it was just, but it was live from the channel at Chopu, which again, makes people feel more connected to the world in that way, to the surf world. So, of course, they've gotten better. The way that technology has affected the pro surfing also is the waves got better. So they don't have to go to Huntington anymore. They can go to Cloudbreak, they can go to Bali, they can go to all the best waves in the world, and you can still feel connected to it because, it's happening in real time. So the other thing too with the pro surfing is that the pro surfers who you maybe cared about a little bit in magazines, all of a sudden you're hearing these guys talk after heats. And granted, most of the stuff is kind of canned. They'll just say, oh man, great heat, whatever. But occasionally, guys, like I was in New York when Bobby Martinez came in after he won his heat famously and just railed on the ASP, started throwing F-bombs, and the guys were like, it was live on the internet, and he knew it. And within seconds, the entire surf world was talking about it. It was really engaged, really connected. The ASP had to react, and again, like pre-internet, that would have never happened. He wouldn't necessarily have had that platform that immediately to talk about something like that. So, there was that, and so it was kind of like the unedited communication to thousands of surfers around the world. And then, like I said, the next day, that's what everyone was talking about was Bobby. So, everyone knows these days kind of what Kelly's doing, that he sneaks off to Tavarua. Everyone knows what kind of beer Dane drinks after his session at Emma Wood. Who's sponsored by who, what swells are on the way, what the wind's gonna do tomorrow. And again, everyone's like really connected. But for me, I've been involved like not as long as Sam, but in digital surf media for 10 years or 12 years or since it sort of started. So my question to myself when I was thinking about this was, is that a good thing? Is it really a good thing? And so like about a month ago, we did a world champ roundtable in Dana Point with Kelly, Mick, Parco, and CJ. And I was asking them about what they thought about media and how it affected, did being on a webcast affect how you approach the heat? How did all this stuff? And they started talking about early videotapes, Taylor Steele, the performers, all these things from back in the 80s when they started surfing. And they were saying how rad it was that we'd kind of get to this part in the thing and we'd stop it and rewind it and wear it out and go back and we'd look at it and we'd go and Kelly would go, oh, we want to do like a Richard Cram cutback, and they'd kind of go back to that thing and go. And so, a quote from Kelly that I just wrote down that he said was basically, it's almost like having a lack of information, you plant different seeds. Whereas now you get every bit of information, you see all this stuff immediately, it's almost as if it doesn't give it a chance to grow. Okay, so Kelly said that. And then Mick kind of agreed and said, I think it's good that kids can access that stuff, but there needs to be a happy medium in some way for small stuff. You can kind of go straight to the web, but other stuff you try and hold on to. So Mick's also making this kind of big offline production now. So I was bummed when they said that a little bit, because my whole deal had been always to get information out to people really quickly. It felt to me like it was a good resource for people to be connected to the surf world and to have news and be able to respond to news. And so I was like, man, when these guys said that, I was like, damn, like they're not that into it. So it's like, okay. But I kind of understood, but also looking around now at the landscape, I mean, it's kind of gone to this thing where it's like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all these different kinds of things are about as quick hit as you can get in terms of surf media. Like, there is saturation of surf media. You can just wake up. I mean, if you just woke up at 8 a.m. and looked at you could look at surf stuff from like the moment you woke up till the moment you went to bed and not see the same thing twice. I mean, there's so much surf stuff that you can see. And so what I've been seeing now a little bit is there's been a backlash, and maybe backlash is a little too extreme, but like there's been, like, for example, another form of technology is like a shaping machine. There's the best shaping machines in the world. You can make a board without ever touching it. You can sit there and program the whole thing, and it will be insane. You go to the thing at the Almeric factory. It's the raddest thing I've ever seen. But then you got like Danny over here in San Francisco just making wood boards by hand. And he's not alone. There's lots of people doing that. And it's not necessarily a reaction to the technology, but it's another avenue for the technology. Like, you got guys, you can go, anyone in this room with a credit card that's not maxed out could see a swell and go somewhere like tomorrow if you wanted to, but there's also guys like Cyrus Sutton who like kits out his van, puts a thing on the thing, puts a little stove in there and just drives to Mexico for a few months by himself, just not, turns his phone off or whatever. So there is that kind of backlash. You can watch like webcasts all day long, but there's still a lot of guys who don't care who Gabriel Medina is. There's many, many people who don't care who he is. But he's amazing. I mean, he's one of the best surfers in the world. So the other thing too that I've noticed is that if you look online, there's all these, there's been a dearth of 3-minute video clips, right? Like really quick to one song. But there's also now, there's these hour-long shows that are, people are more willing to look at things online that are longer. Like the roundtable thing that we did was like an hour long, and we watched just the numbers of people were consuming. I mean, people watched it. It's a bunch of dudes sitting around talking. It's not like an MTV. The criticism of the internet being this thing that forces people to have short attention spans and all that kind of stuff is kind of true, but it's also just a vehicle. The other thing, and magazines are still around. There's still a few mags around. And despite the claim that surfers don't read, which is another claim, that wouldn't be, so hard to argue, except for the fact that if you ever look at a story online that has any kind of point of view or any kind of slightly sort of controversial topic, the comment sections below stories in magazines show that surfers read. There's a lot of smart guys who read who never had a voice before, guys who are just sitting at their computer. They love surfing. It's the most important thing in their life, but they got a job. They're not in the surf media. They don't have money to make a blog, but they can sit there, they can read a story, and they can make a comment. I mean, 2 years ago in San Francisco, Kelly Slater didn't win his world title because a guy figured it out who was just looking at a story and did the math. The ASP didn't know that. Kelly didn't know it. Kelly found it in the Surfline comments. He's like, oh shit, I didn't actually win. And that was, I mean, it would have come out, but it was like some guy that was just reading the story made it. So there was this kind of connection again to the surf world, and this guy, he was actually totally anonymous. So some people argue, the conspiracy theorists argue that it was Kelly himself. Who knows if that's true or not. The other thing too, kind of in closing, in a way that the internet has democratized surf media, is like, I don't know if people followed what happened with Cam Richards and Dane Reynolds. Like in September, Cam Richards is this kid from South Carolina who's a really good surfer. And Dane Reynolds is, probably the second most popular surfer in the world. And there was an online voting contest to get into the Hurley Pro. And Cam, it was like everyone was like, yeah, of course Dane's going to get in. But Cam engaged his social network in a way, and people just started voting for him. And you like look at the number. You could look at the numbers throughout the course of the day, and Cam was beating Dane Reynolds all day just because of who he was able to engage. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's no way Cam Richards would have even come close to talking to Dane. Dane eventually ended up winning, in part because like Tony Hawk went on, and in part because he got an Instagram account. So it was this kind of funny little battle. So, and anyway, kind of in closing, it's the the other thing I wanted to say too is surfers kind of have a direct line of access to their fans. Like Cam was able to access his fans. He kind of could create who he wanted to create. It's not like he needed the surf media to tell everyone who he was. He's like, hey, this is who I am, check me out. And so whether or not he was as good at it as we would have been, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think we're okay at it, but anyways, he was able to do that, you know. So it's kind of like the magazines are no longer the arbiters of what the perfect wave is, or maybe what the culture is, or what it should be, you know. It's really been a democratizing thing with, you know, the internet. And then, so that's the main thing, I guess, for me, in closing, about technology. It's really decentralized our stories, you know. It's like Dan was saying too about, or Sam was saying, looking out in the audience and seeing just a whole different, it's not the same guys. It's, you know, it's girls, it's kids from Brazil, it's, you know, little kids, it's old people. I mean, and all of those people, to me at least, seem like have a voice now, where 10 years ago they didn't. So that's kind of been my experience. Thanks.
Good morning. Good morning. First off, thanks for coming out today, you guys. It's a beautiful day out there, so thanks for coming and hanging out with us inside. Trey, thanks for putting this on, and it's really an honor to be in the room with all these amazing surf minds. So anyway, I didn't really prepare too much. I have a couple of videos that I wanted to show you guys. I guess I'm part of the generation that learned to surf with the boys, and then got really inspired when I saw an ad of Lisa Anderson surfing in the 90s, and I was like, what? Girl, she's rad. Like, I want to surf like her. She can do it, I can do it. Thought I had to ride a shortboard, you know? I was like, wait, where's... And then when I found out that I could longboard, it's like, sweet, this is what I'm doing. I love this. So that was in the mid-90s, and let's see, in 2000, I got sponsored by Roxy, which was a pretty cool thing to do. I was riding for them for about 8 years, which meant a lot of product. And, you know, it wasn't definitely like a career path for me or anything. It was like juggling lots of stuff. I went to college here at UC Santa Cruz. That was awesome also. I lived in the dorms here at Adams, was at Cal College here. When I moved up here from Southern California, I was surfing around Malibu and stuff growing up. It was like, wait, you know, there's all these women up here surfing. It's hardcore up here. There's rocks, there's big waves. The waves are, you know, powerful. This is rad. You know, these girls are super cool. I'd never like seen these other women surfing before. Wasn't exposed to that. It was mostly like bikinis and Rochelle Ballard and like those girls ripping on shortboards. But it was like, oh, this is this whole other community. So it was really supportive and pretty awesome to be a part of the NorCal scene. So anyway, just wanted to show a couple videos of some women's surfing stuff that's happening now, and a brand called Sia that's doing some cool swimsuits and stuff. I don't know how to get to Vimeo, but I'm sure I could figure it out.
Howdy, everybody. My name's Drew Brophy. I'm a professional artist, I guess. I'm very stoked to be here and find myself have some interesting perspective on this whole topic. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in South Carolina, which is not the surf mecca, and I wasn't influenced by such things as Sam and Jim's magazines and things. The only thing I knew is that there was a few people in my town that surfed, and we had a beautiful beach, and the only thing I wanted to do was ride waves. I like to say riding waves saved my life because there was not anything else to do. There was only a few boards in town, and we shared them, and then as time came on, as I got older, surfing got bigger in our town. One of the unique things about growing up in that area is there was no localism. There wasn't enough surfers to be localism. You actually went looking for other people to go surf with and wanted to go meet them. And when the waves got good, we would try to travel and go to different towns and look for other surfers to surf with and hang out with them and find new spots and have barbecues afterwards, see new boards. This is the late 70s, early 80s. I grew up riding single fins or longboards, really whatever we could get our hands on. And that was the experience that I grew up with, and it was awesome. We just really wanted to find waves. We wanted to ride anything we could get our hands on and any type of boards we could use, and other people that shared that experience and enjoy it. So I was hooked. Lucky enough for me, there was a guy that's shaped surfboards in a town down from mine, and it just so happened to be Kelly Richards, Cam Richards' father. Everybody knew each other, and I was very lucky to be taken in by this small surf community of people, and they knew that I had a knack for something, which was art. So they kindly suggested to me that I should paint surfboards. And so I did in Kelly Richards' factory. I never airbrushed before or anything like that. Painting surfboards was more of a technical job. And the whole surf industry really hadn't exploded yet for us. But then as time grew, the surf industry crept in of kind of what we were talking about. I think Sam nailed it right on, that there's this experience of surfing, which is so authentic and real and perfect, and we just love it, lifelong surfers. And then there's this other thing that is out in the world, which is this media, or, I don't know what to describe it, but it's not that it's not real, it's something different. It's somebody else's point of view of what surfing is. A lot of times that might come from people who don't surf, or they're trying to depict something that we're all enjoying. I like to think of surfing as pure joy, and all these movies and videos and things are different aspects of it, but I really like that piece you just put up of that adventure of going to look for waves. That's part of it. That's what got me. I wanted to go to all those great places. It was about the wave. Seeing a picture in Surfer magazine, I didn't care who was riding it. I wanted to go ride that place. I wanted to go there. All these fantastic places in the world, and I like to think that surfers are some of the most lucky people, that they get to go to the most beautiful places on this planet. And those places and those waves and those people that I meet in those places are the things that inspire my art. When I go to these places, I paint the wave and I paint the stories that these guys tell me, whether I'm in Tahiti, Australia, South Africa, or wherever I am. Due to the fact of this surf community, Kelly Richards and lots of others, they gave me a career painting surfboards, which ultimately led me to move to Hawaii and eventually travel the world painting surfboards. And that put me in a very real place of working with the real people of, I like to say, of surfing, is the craftsmen, the people that are making these surfboards. They're the leaders in their community who are giving this gift of surfing to the kids and to all these people. And what a great experience this has been for me. All over the world, these like little surf communities making boards, and it's, this handcrafted thing. I mean, you look at all those boards over there, people made them with their hands, and it's a lot of work. And a lot of times you don't get paid a whole lot for it. I mean, I used to get paid like $10 a board to airbrush, and I'd have to do 10 or 20 boards a day to make any money. And you do that all over the place, and you meet all these characters. I mean, they're the real heart and soul of this surf industry that allows the people to ride waves. For my part, decorating the surfboards is asking and talking to these surfers, what do you want on your board? For a long time in the early 90s when I was in Hawaii, I'm painting black stripes on Curran's boards and swooshes on Tom Carroll's boards, and it was very boring. It was more technical than anything else. I was like, man, this is kind of not that fun. Nobody thought doing something real crazy on your board was cool. It wasn't cool to have something real bright and flashy. I guess that was because the 80s was so neon and crazy that it went the whole other direction into more black wetsuits, white surfboards, which was not good for me because I was a surfboard painter. I was desperately trying to put more personality and more stories onto my boards. And I did it on mine, and I remember Kelly Richards telling me I was going to get beat up if I rode my boards with paint all over them. But in actuality, I actually got a shot in Surfer magazine because my board was painted. Because it made the wave look really cool, and it was like a tube shot in Puerto Escondido. And anyway, as time went, I was painting on boards like this, which for those of you that don't know, airbrushing and tinting lambs is all done in the production process of a board. And like I said, it's more technical, and it's limiting because you can't do as much for the cost. And so I started painting them with paint pens. And that allowed me to get more art on the board, make it more complicated, and do it faster for a better price. And the best part of it, it was done at the end of the process versus in the second stage of the process after shaping, which kind of slowed things up. You could just make all the boards white, paint them afterwards. I just thought that was a better system. And you could sell the boards to a shop, and my idea was every shop would have their own artist. Each little community would have their own identity, not something that was pushed out by a company forced upon them. And it would support more artists like me. And at the time, that it wasn't really well accepted until I moved to San Clemente, California for the summer and met a guy named Matt Biolas with Lost Surfboards. Have you ever heard of it? I actually was entertaining the fact of coming up to Santa Cruz, and I wanted to go work with Bob Pearson back there, but I ended up going to San Clemente instead. The water was warmer, and I'm sure I would have had a great career up here as well. But Matt was the only person that got it about putting more personality on the board and bringing more art into this canvas that we're riding on. And immediately once he allowed me to do that, our careers exploded, and we really kind of changed the way surfboards looked and the way they were painted. And so if you notice today with pro surfers and really individuals, that dream of mine of having like each like little surf shop or community have their own style and identity on their board, it's really kind of materialized. You see guys like Dane Reynolds and the Gadowskis boys, even Kelly Slater, in the early days in Hawaii, he was one of the guys that painted his own boards. He did a lot of cool, like funny little cartoons on his boards. And I just think that is a much better thing when everybody's putting their own personality on there and letting it, you know, for everybody to see, especially the big air shots. It's really cool. So for me, meeting all these real grassroots people inside the craftsmanship of making surfboards, it was a unique place for me to be in. And being able to travel through that is really cool. And I like what Sam was talking about with the media influence and everything. You know, once the companies start all the advertising and all the propaganda that gets put out there, something gets lost. I can remember showing up in Japan to work. And of course, I wanted to surf more than anything. Everywhere I want to go, I want to surf. And so we show up at the beach to go surfing before we work. And there was all these cars on the beach with surfers in them. And I thought it was cool. And they all were like suiting up their wetsuits. And they all had like Almeric boards. They get stuck on these trends, I guess. And they had all the stuff, all the accessories that you need, even more things than I ever thought of. I always thought you just needed a pair of shorts and a board and just go. But they had all the stuff. And they're sitting around the back smoking cigarettes. In their full suits or boots and their gloves. I'm thinking, God, the water must be cold. When we go out there, the water's like 70-something degrees. And they spent more time standing on the beach than they did in the water. And then once they got in the water, they really didn't surf. They really didn't know how. And just using that as an example, they're missing the biggest part of it. They've been sold this idea of what surfing is having this 6'2" surfboard, all the crap, all this kind of things, and showing up at the beach, and everybody stands around and looks cool. And that's not what it is. I think of it back when I was a kid. There was nothing else to do. You got this board. You can have fun. It's free. You're in the water just having a great time with other people. you're enjoying the other guy's wave just as much as your own. You're like, whoa, that was a great wave, or the great wipeout, like, ah, man, you just got killed on that one. I mean, that's all part of the story. And then to be able to grow up and go on these big adventures is awesome. But there again, the surf media is kind of messed it up a little bit, because you show up to some of these breaks and you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's still 20 people in the water. That's kind of a bum out after you spend out all this money. And like Sam was saying, you think you need to be alone and have it to yourself. Well, it's good when you have your people you know and things like that, but when you show up at a place in, like Tavarua, for instance, and there's a bunch of guys that don't really know how to surf the wave, and you can't even go out because you don't have enough money to go to that island. I remember sitting in a boat because I was in Namotu, and all these rich guys who basically bought up the wave, they're all out there in their reef booties and their boards, and they're not even getting barreled. They're sitting on the edge, and I think John Roseman was getting all the barrels. And I'm sitting there, and I don't have enough money to go stay on Tabarua, and I'm just sitting there like, I can't even surf that wave. I can probably surf it better than most of those guys, but I can't go there. I don't have enough money. But I think that's what that surf travel started to become. And you show up in the Mentawais or some of these other places, and that's what they think it is. And it's rough being in Indo and seeing a bunch of grouchy guys because it's crowded. So sometimes just your local break on a day that this big is just as fun. For me, I like chasing big waves. I just like the pursuit of surfing. And as far as the aesthetics go, I think it's kind of been hijacked, like thinking of what Sam was speaking about. The media and I think surf companies have created this false image of surfing, that it's pro surfing, and it's not. I know plenty of people that don't know who Kelly Slater is and do not care. They just want to go ride waves with their girlfriends. Like seeing all these girls that surf. I mean, like come up to a surf school, they learn to surf, next thing you know, they're just out there, they're getting pitched, they're falling down, they're having a blast. These new surfers are the ones that feed the surf industry, that buy all the stuff. And I think we forget that sometimes as surfers. And that the pro surfing side of it is a little bit frustrating for me, especially when it corrupts the young kids. When I see the contests and all that kind of stuff, and it's all about winning, and it's all about this, it's this other thing other than the joy of riding waves. And I think the joy of riding waves is really the best part that everybody can share in, and not so much the contest part. I think the contest part is great, watching great athletes do their thing, but that's a small part of it. There's a small portion of people that can do that. And it's fun to watch, like live. I mean, the live thing is awesome, seeing the best surfers ride the best waves. I honestly think the best live thing was the cloud break footage, watching some of the best surfers that made sure they were at the right place at the right time to show up for that cloud break swell, which was unbelievable. I wish I was there. And the contest was called off. The best surfers in the world didn't want to surf. They didn't want to surf it. But all these other guys showed up. And to watch Reef McIntosh like go all the way across the line and get barreled on this 25-foot wave was just like mind-boggling. So they left the cameras going, and these guys just surfed. And that was like the best show of surfing that I've ever seen. So, I mean, when I got put on this forum to say the aesthetics of surfing and where it's going and what it is, I think it's a lot of different things, and I think to different people, especially people who don't surf or a company that has an agenda, they try to make it into something that it's not. And so you always got to remember what it really is about riding waves and the joy of riding those waves with people and sharing them, being able to enjoy somebody else's wave just as much as your own, to appreciate a good day, a bad day, and just being in the water. And on that note, not that the surf industry is all bad, it's not. But it's changing, it's evolving, and I think it's changing for the better. On my street in San Clemente and Los Molinos, there's probably 100 different shapers that make a living shaping surfboards and lambing surfboards. And there's pro surfers on my street all the time. But you know what I see the most of is just kids like that building kook boxes, and kook boxes is like kind of a board that you make out of wood, and shaping their own boards, just trying different things. More things are being accepted. Riding waves is riding waves, whether they're making hand planes to go body surf, they're making these funky little finless boards. I don't even know what you call them, but I mean, they're coming in every shapes and sizes. And the most important thing is they're having fun doing it. They're almost going against the surf companies. They don't want to ride a 6'2" tri-fin. They could care less. You go into a store now, it's not like it used to be when you go in and the guy who's there is like the local surf hero, and he tells you what to do, and you just like the experience of being a part of it. Now you walk in, there's like a bunch of 6'2" surfboards, they're all white, and you got your black wetsuits, and you got some guy that's cool, and he wants you to be cool. The surf industry is like too cool for itself. Everybody thinks they're cool, and I don't even know what that is. Just like to surf. But there's hope because these kids are going against the establishment, and since, you know, there's only like a half dozen big surf companies, and they're not doing real well. I think it's because real people, the authentic surfers, they want authentic things. If there's like a little clothing company that makes shorts or t-shirts or something like that, they want to know the guy that did it, or at least like the guy that made it, that it's real and authentic. Like me, like I like, what's somebody going to say? My art's not based on real stuff? I mean, I go to a place and ride the wave and I paint what I see. I think it transcends what it's about. And I think people are looking for that authenticity of a real person, somebody that surfs and somebody who lives the lifestyle. And it can't be just printed in a magazine and sold to people anymore. The kids are smarter than that now. So they want to be a participant. They want to get their hands on it. They want to learn how to shape. They want to make their own stuff. And I think that's where the aesthetic of surfing is going. They want to be participants. They don't want to be consumers, sold a bunch of crap from overseas or wherever. They really want to live the lifestyle. So that's my take on it. Thank you.